Below the Line is an online journal aimed at provoking thought and opinion, with the hope to start and deepen conversations between communities and within communities, out of which we may become a better world.
Lots of conversations about these things in ways that are happening on universities, but I think this will be a new conversation, one which will engage the things that we face in the world. And to begin with, it will be Christopher Hitchens for 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, by all means, restrain your applause, as I was rather alarmed to see you just did. Without my asking, all praise in any case, all praise belongs to Allah. Thank you, Mr. President, for that very generous introduction. Thank you, Dinesh, for again agreeing to be my sparring partner. And I ought to say, and I do this without, I hope, any hint of unction, that ever since I began this challenge some years ago now, with my book, I've been very impressed and very touched by the generosity and the open-mindedness and the kindness, especially of so many Christian audiences in the United States who allow me to abuse their hospitality in a way that at least I hope I can redeem by being amusing and perhaps instructive. And I've got 5 minutes, and that's the most I'm going to waste on politeness of that kind, but believe me, it was well meant. Now, I'm glad that Socrates was mentioned so early and so soon. In Dinesh's work, it's often said that there's no more certainty that the man Socrates existed than there is, actually I think Dinesh would say there's even less, than there is that say Jesus of Nazareth was a real person, or the Prophet Muhammad was a real person, at least in the sense believed in by his devotees. But you see, it doesn't matter to me to prove that Socrates existed. I don't need to prove that, because I don't believe that by studying his method that I can achieve bliss. I don't think it'll bring me happiness. I don't think it'll bring me salvation. I don't think I'll get eternal life from saying how amazing it is that such a person ever existed, because I personally don't think that these promises can be kept. And I also think that as gifts, they're not worth having. What I learned from the Socratic method is the only thing that really is worth having. And I say this to an audience of people undergoing, for the most part, their higher education. The most important thing of all, the ability to take the great risk, the most worthwhile risk of thinking for yourself and accepting all the consequences, however unpleasant some of them may be, of taking that chance. That, to me, is the most important thing of all. And that is why I begin by a simple proposition: of all these so-called virtues, the one that is the most overrated is that of faith, because there is no a priori belief in which we can say we have any certainty. Indeed, all the progress that makes it possible for us to be here, for me to be speaking through this microphone, for us to be rehearsing these arguments, comes precisely from the opposite. From the realization, as Socrates puts it, that everything must be doubted, if it was Socrates. If he did it, he didn't write anything, but he's well reported. And that the only test of an informed or educated person is how much that person understands how little they know. Let me warn you, those of you who are young, that this only gets worse, or I would say better, as your education improves and increases. You'll find out there are even more things you don't know about. You'll get an even better idea of how little you know, of how little you understand. You'll get, when you study galaxy formation, a subject we didn't even know about till recently, that nobody knows very much about it. Though we do know now about our primate and mammal nature, and what we have in common with other animals through the study of DNA that Francis Collins has done so much to advance, we still don't know enough about it to be any use to us. We can't use it as we once hoped we could, or not yet, for cures. We hope that will happen, but we don't know how that will happen yet. We know that the quantum, in some sense, exists. If you make predictions based on it, they'll be right to an amazing degree of exactitude, but nobody knows what the quantum really is or how it works. And I could go on, and these are arguments from my own ignorance that I wouldn't have been able to make. I wouldn't have been smart enough or well-informed enough to be able to make these observations even 10 years ago. Now I'm so much better educated that I know so much less, about so much more, or so much more about how little I know. And the one thing that's useless to me is faith. To say, but there is a human sacrifice that some people say took place of someone who might have been distantly related to a deity in Bronze Age Judea about 2,000 years ago. That means that I really don't have to worry about anything. I'll live forever, my sins are forgiven, I'm saved, and all moral and ethical questions are solved. Now, this is the one proposition that has no value morally, scientifically, ontologically, epistemologically, of any kind at all. It's the one assumption that you have to discard before you can go on. Because if you will believe that, you might as well believe, say, that an illiterate Arab merchant living in a cave and unable to read or write was nonetheless able to take dictation and put it down in the form of what's called a recitation, still, the Quran, in an infallible and unalterable form that is dangerous, in fact, to disagree with, and that contains all that any person needs by way of the law, ethics, morals, or interpretation. If you can believe one, you're perfectly entitled to believe the other, which is indeed a plagiarism of the first opinion. So, it is said, well, in answer to that, well, okay, we can't necessarily say it's true. We may not know that it's true. Actually, I can't see how a person of faith can make this concession, but some do. It may not be true, but at least it makes people behave better. The same, of course, could be said of a belief in Vishnu. It can't already be true. By that you mean I've got another 5 minutes. I mean I've got another minute. Or could it be said that by now anyone who hadn't got my point was never going to get it? I'll make three assertions. You'll be questioning me later, so bear in mind that these would have been things I've tried to be eloquent about as well. Religion, if you're going to say it makes people behave better, you must be willing to admit that it's just as likely it'll make people behave worse. Many of the worst behaviors indeed arise from differences about what kind of religion is the best one, which seems to make it an imperfect or, let's say, insecure source of morality and good behavior, and that in the desire for a celestial, or heavenly, or supernatural, or non-scientific authority, someone who's decided everything that you need to know before you were born, and will continue to arbitrate it after you are dead, you run the risk of having asked for a totalitarian authority, for a big brother solution, for a tyranny that is the ultimate terminus of unfreedom, not just in this world, but in the one that you strive so fearfully to imagine. In these respects, I propose that humanity will be better off if it outgrew religious faith. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much.